Hi, welcome to Change Your Mind. I'm James Eade, and I live in the divided states of America. And these days are trying for many of us because we are stuck in the way we think, and we have to have someone to blame. And what we are doing is dividing ourselves into camps. And we live in glass houses and throw our stones at each other, and we get surprised when our feet are bloody. So, what are we going to do to unify the country once again? And I think it starts with ourselves, each one of us, because unity does not mean uniformity. We do not have to dress alike, sound alike. We do not have to behave in the same ways. We have to be tolerant of differences. And we have to be part of a community that believes that we are all entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And as long as we do no harm, we should be grateful to be part of a community that has differences, different thoughts, different feelings, different ways of expressing themselves. And we must learn to be united again as a country. But how do we change our minds? How do we change the way we think? Can we change the way we think? Can we learn tools and techniques to help us? Well, I brought in a guest today to help me figure out some of those tools and techniques. She's a life coach, and her name is Divya Love Wise. I'm going to bring her on right now. Hello, Divya.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well, and I appreciate your coming to help me with this thorny problem. People are talking about civil war. Well, civil war pits brother against sister and hurts all of the children. There's no way that we can allow something like that to happen, but it's getting out of hand. So, as a country, or as an individual, because I think it's an inside job, people have to do it themselves, change the way they think. Can they? Can people do that? When you are a life coach, first, let me ask you, what does a life coach mean? I mean, do you teach people how to live? Do you teach people that there's one way to live and they have to do it that way? Well, how does that work?
Well, that's a really good question, Jim. And the short answer is yes. Sometimes I do teach people um, how to live, but in their own authentic way. And it's more about teaching people how to think. So, what you're speaking to is a very powerful resource, that we can we can reframe our thoughts. We can utilize several different tools to help us navigate this, really challenging times that we're going through, where, like you say, it is divided. And oftentimes we can take these divisions personally, especially if it's with a family member or a friend
Mhm.
group or at work. Oftentimes we can revert back to children, where we take the blame for whatever the other person is um, professing that is their challenge, and we can take ownership of that, even though it's not really ours to own, but we've been programmed that way, most of us, since childhood, to keep the peace. And
Mm,
and usually that's at our own expense.
I see. And when you talk about tools, this is really what I'm really interested in is you talk about tools, but I'm having trouble imagining what that really means. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for me?
Sure. One of the things that really makes a life coach a valuable resource to have uh, is that we do come with a pocket full of tools and techniques that can be applied to any situation and help to really um, change your mind. Exactly what the name of your show is, to change your mind about what is happening, what you're experiencing, or what you're seeing. And just to name a couple of those tools, and I can go in a little more detail about what they are and how to use them. I mentioned already, like a reframe. That is a tool that sounds, kind of obscure, but there are some people who have one way of looking at things. And, we often hear people say, well, this is the only way this can happen. And if it doesn't happen this way, then what am I going to do? But in reality, there are unlimited ways something can, someone can perceive something. And oftentimes we go to our programmed response,
Mhm.
where we're more of reacting to what we're experiencing or seeing or hearing or feeling, instead of um, responding or being, proactive.
I
And so,
love that.
yeah,
Yeah, what I look at is like, I get a stimulus and it hits the base of my skull into my amygdala, and then I have a pre-programmed, as you mentioned, pre-programmed response to that, not response, but a reaction to it.
reaction.
And
Yes.
it's an instinctual kind of thing, and there's no frontal lobe activity that
Right.
says I'm deciding to behave this way. I just
Right.
do it. And so I've been trying to stop doing that. And one of the ways I do it, and tell me if this is a tool that you would recommend, is I take a deep breath sometimes before I engage in the behavior. And I find that that moment of reflection, even if it's like in nanoseconds or milliseconds, that's enough for me to change my behavior.
Yes, and that is so important, that you mentioned the breath. Science has shown that when we can control our breath, we can control our mind. And and yes, and in life coaching, we learn and teach that our thoughts create our emotions, and then our emotions we act from those emotions. And so when you can take that breath, just a deep breath, uh, it does more than just bringing oxygen into your body. It
Mhm.
actually has a direct effect on your brain. So when you can take a slow breath, it will actually slow your brain so that you're less likely to react out of that pre-programming that is really subconscious
Right.
and might not be the best response, and it might not even be the way you want to respond.
Right. That's what I'm feeling, is like so
Yeah,
many times those reactions, those instinctive reactions that happen without thought, I regret them.
exactly.
And so then
Exactly.
I have to make amends. I have to say I'm sorry. I have to try to repair the damage that I've done by really really thoughtless behavior. But if I can take that deep breath and behave in a way that is of my choosing rather
Yes.
than of my programming, like my little kid programming, where I
Right.
just you hurt my feelings, I want to hurt you, whack.
Right. Right. Exactly. And taking that breath gives us a moment to also pause in our response, and it gives us a moment to then add in another tool, like reframing. For instance, I'll go back to the reframing, like the example, if someone says something and it hurts our feelings, um, we're going to take ownership of that and say, well, I must have done something. That might be our first response and reaction. And if we take that deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth, and slowly, it gives us a moment to stop, the response so that our brain can slow down and move to a different part of the brain, actually. Like you mentioned, the back of the brain, the amygdala, and, that area is our primitive area. And when we can pause in that breath and actually bring our awareness to the front of the brain, oftentimes the yogis refer to that as the point between the eyebrows, the spiritual eye, the third eye, the sixth chakra. Those are all some common terms. You're actually shifting the energy in your brain. You're shifting the energy from back here in the back, which is the fight or flight, survival, primitive.
Please, right,
You're
right,
bringing that energy to the frontal lobe of the brain, which
right.
is actually the part of the brain that holds joy, happiness, love. So when you can pause with that very important breath that you mentioned, you're literally shifting the part of your brain that your response is going to come from.
And for me, it's also like that's where the do no harm is.
Yes.
It's when I can take that breath, and I've felt this often enough that I know it's true. I have no desire to do harm.
Yes.
I want to, if there's a tense situation, I want to ease the tension,
Yes.
not escalate it, which I have done in the
Right.
past.
Right. And that's the normal response. And then when we can come from here, it actually opens up the window of our own understanding as to what's actually happening here. Am I really being attacked? Or maybe this person, and this is where we can start reframing. Maybe this person has just had a really hard day. I mean,
Yes,
maybe they just got out of,
not at their best.
yeah, maybe they just had a fight with their
Right.
significant other. Maybe they just got a cancer diagnosis. Maybe, I mean, there's all kinds of things that obviously influence this person and their action towards us.
And it's not always about me. It's not
Most
like
of the
quit
time,
taking it personally. Q-tip
that's
is
right.
that's one of the little phrases that I use that helps me think that you quit taking it personally, because it could be about them and not about you.
Exactly. And most of the time,
It
it
is.
is. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're somewhat conscious about moving about the earth in a conscious way,
Right.
you're not out there saying things and doing things that would elicit that type of response from others.
Right.
So when that happens, kind of catches us off guard, and then we react
Right.
from the limbic part of our system and brain, and usually that does not produce the results that we would want.
Thinking of my own history, I agree. Now, when we talk about things like, um, for example, when we have as a society we have these tensions about, like, let's just take immigration for example.
Okay.
We don't want people that aren't that don't look like us, sound like us, or aren't didn't get weren't born where we were born to come into this. And yet we're a country of immigrants. We've all come from someplace else. So
Exactly.
we want people to come. The Statue of Liberty is there for a reason, to welcome the huddled masses and
Yes.
the tired and the poor. And so, why are we as a country so divided on this particular issue? And how would you, as a life coach, if I'm really upset about immigration, how would you get me to reframe it, look at it differently?
Mm.
Just to pick a big topic.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is an important topic, because we all come from somewhere, and it's really just a matter of, we don't really choose where we're born.
Right.
And yeah, so I appreciate that question. I think that one of the tools that or I like to call this one a superpower.
Oh,
Um, one, it's a super, like a super tool, is to practice compassion or empathy. Most of our ancestors, unless you're indigenous, are not from here. And I think if there's a way in having a conversation with someone like that, that's a topic that's easily escalated
right.
when people have opposing views and try to have a conversation about it. I think being able to bring that big topic down to a relatable point where you can have a conversation about our ancestors. And well, mine are from Poland and Denmark, and where are yours from, and help people see outside of their limited window. And most of the time when we limit our window of consciousness of what we allow ourselves to see and understand, is that of fear of
Yeah,
what's different,
right.
fear of someone's going to get mine or take mine, or whatever I have to hold on to it because others want it, which is usually not true. That's just an assumption, which is another tool. And I think this particular subject about immigration is a wonderful place to apply the tool of assumption. It's a little bit harder to navigate without, a life coach or someone helping. But, the what are all of the assumptions about immigrants?
Right.
There are so many, but they're just assumptions. Well, they're here to take my job.
Right.
They want to come here and not pay taxes, or they want to come here and have babies. And
Yeah.
but all of those are assumptions.
Because what we find is that people are coming and doing jobs that we don't want to do ourselves.
Exactly.
And so a lot of those assumptions are just false. But I think rather than challenging people, which I find to be counterproductive,
Yeah.
to maneuver the conversation. I don't know if I'm using the right terms. You can coach me on that. But towards like setting policy. Like we're a nation of immigrants. We all want immigrants to come in and replenish our society and
Yeah.
re-energize it and start businesses that we wouldn't have started and do all the things that immigrants have continuously done for this country. We all want that, but how do we manage it? And so we talk about specific policies.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, you want to build a wall to keep them out. That's not really solving the problem. How do you allow them in a manageable way? And then you get into this, wow, this is a really hard problem. And then you start thinking together instead of arguing together.
Yes. I love that. I really like that, bringing it down to the policy. And also another really important tool
That's
is
reframing. I'm just curious, is that reframing?
it is, no, that wouldn't be reframing. Reframing would be I don't know if that would go. Well, reframing would be if someone said, to you in a conversation,
Just temporarily paused. There we go. I'm not sure if what the word is if it's not reframing.
reframing. Yeah.
But that's the mechanism that I found to be useful for me
Yes.
in those tricky arguments. Instead of trying to win the argument,
Right.
finding common ground.
Exactly. And I would also add to that, asking good questions, open-ended questions. What that is a coach's best friend.
I am
is
so unskillful at that, and I have consciously tried to get better at that. So I know what you're saying.
Right.
It's a great thing. Yeah.
It takes
Practice.
practice. So you want to ask the person questions, become curious
Yes.
is really I would say take the deep breath. If I were to put these in order
Mhm.
of importance and even in practicing these tools, I would say take the deep breath and then get curious.
Mhm.
Allow yourself to almost relax into curiosity about, tell me more about that. That's an open-ended question. They can't say yes or no. They have to tell you more about why they feel that way. What is it that's caused you to feel that way?
Mhm.
Or tell me about an incident where you've encountered an immigrant and tell me about your experience with immigrants. And so asking open-ended questions that are founded on curiosity
Right.
can really lower the defense response of the other person that you're trying to engage in.
That is so true, and often I catch myself mansplaining. You know, I have I I really have this character trait where I think I if I can just explain the situation to them, they'll understand it and then we'll agree. And it doesn't work like that in real life. You know, it's this technique of using
Right.
open-ended questioning is far
Yeah.
more powerful when I can remember. So it's the deep breath, be curious.
Yes. And
Okay.
and it's almost like allow yourself to, because our own defenses pop up when something feels like, someone is really being untoward, and that our immediate response usually is to, unless we've practiced these alternatives, is to show up in our own defense. So that's where that deep breath you mentioned is so vital, because that actually has a physiological and neurological implication for us, not for the other person yet, but
Right.
for us it does. And then we can shift our response from just the primal response of you got me, I'm going to get you now, to here, which is joy and do no harm,
Mhm.
and then drop in to curiosity. So it's almost like when you're dropping into curiosity, it's challenging to be curious and defensive all at the same time.
That's true. I can really get behind that. I think that I'm writing it down because I want to remember, after after the breath,
Mhm.
curiosity. Because I find when I'm curious about something, all of like there's no wanting to win because you're not involved in a contest.
Right.
You're curious. You just want to
Right.
know more.
Yeah.
And when I'm in the mode of learning, it's much better than when I'm involved in interactions like we're talking about than explaining, you
Yeah.
know. Lecturing doesn't get me as far as
Yeah.
thinking, letting the other person feel like they're heard.
Right, right. And the other tools are really, really great is acknowledging and validating. So,
Oh,
for instance, if let's use your immigration example, which I really like that. We're having a conversation with someone about immigration, and they're like, they're saying some things that might not be our thoughts and our feelings and our ideas, and they're against immigrants. And we can then take our deep breath, drop into curiosity, and ask questions about what has happened to lead you to this feeling. It sounds like you're feeling really strongly about that. So I'm curious what led you to have these strong beliefs. And then maybe they may say, gosh, I we had my granddad, they tell you a story
yeah, right, right.
of whatever it is. And what you say is, you just acknowledge them. It doesn't mean you
Right.
agree with them. You're
Right.
just acknowledging and validating what they're saying. And every time you do that, they drop their defenses a little bit and they feel heard and seen. And then that opens them up to hear more of that lecture or whatever, the
Right.
thoughts that we have that think would be beneficial. It's kind of it's like going around the corner to achieve the same thing, not really changing their minds, but more about showing them that you hear them and you see them. So you would say, regardless of what the person says to you, whatever story it is that has led them to have these strong thoughts and feelings, you say, gosh, I think anybody in that position would feel the same way. It's understandable.
Rather than challenge them and say you
Exactly.
shouldn't. Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you just say, yes, of course.
Right.
Anyone who would had to have experienced that would probably feel the same way. Um, and then it opens the door for the other person to relax their defenses, because now you're not trying to convince them of anything.
Right.
You've heard them. I mean, you've seen them, and
Yeah,
people feel that
they
when
do. Yes.
when they've been heard and seen, as opposed to when someone is trying to convince them of something that they're really strongly against. They're
Right.
just going to be
Yeah.
non-receptive. They're not going to be receptive to it.
The door closes. Yes.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
Divya Love Wise, thank you for joining me. I'm getting a little bug in my ear telling me I don't have any more time. So I will tell you this, though. This idea of life coach, I was a little bit skeptical. And after listening to you talk, I can see how these things have really helped me. And I think you've changed my mind. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you
So
for that.
I'm going to say goodbye to you now, address my viewing audience. Hi, Mom. And I hope to have you back on at another date and time. Thank you
Thank
again.
you.
Bye bye. All right, that was Divya Love Wise, a life coach. And this has been Change Your Mind. And you want to think about how can you reframe is a new word that I learned, not a new word, but of course, it's a new application for me. How can I reframe discussions or reframe whatever it is that we're discussing or talking about or arguing about, and reframe the way I address it? And a couple of tools that were taught to us today: a deep breath, a slow breath to relax, and then go from the back of your brain with your instincts and your reactions to the front of your brain, where you have your responses, your well thought out responses, where you can experience joy, where you can do no harm, where you're that type of thinker, that type of uh, um, person involved in a discussion that could get tense, but it's up to you to keep it de-escalated and to keep it productive and to get along with each other so that we are united, not divided. And that has been Change Your Mind. Thank you very much. We're going to end the broadcast now, and have a good weekend, a safe weekend, and we will see you again. Bye-bye.